The sound of my sister's laughter through the bedroom door didn't sound like family. It sounded like a funeral bell. I pushed the door open, and the world stopped. My husband, Marcus, the man who swore his life to mine, was tangled in the sheets with a woman who had my face, my braids, my very DNA. Sorel didn't even flinch. She just looked at me, her identical twin, and smirked as she tucked a stray box braid behind her ear. You were always too safe for him. Soria, she whispered, her voice a poisonous echo of my own. He needs a fire you don't have. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I watched as Marcus wouldn't even meet my eyes. He just sat there, letting her claim my spot, my life, my dignity. I turned and walked out into the pouring rain, my heart shattering into jagged glass with every step. 2 hours later, I was a ghost haunting the entrance of the most exclusive club in the city. I collapsed against the cold, matte black hood of a sedan I couldn't afford to touch. The tinted window slid down with a mechanical hum. 6 men in tailored black suits stepped out of the shadows instantly, fanning out like a wall of granite. Then, the back door opened. Lee Kang-hyun, the man the papers called a business mogul, and the streets called the Silent King, the head of the most feared Korean syndicate on this side of the hemisphere. He stepped out, his umbrella shielding me from the storm before it touched his own shoulders. He looked at my tear-stained face, my soaked clothes, and the wedding ring I was crushing in my palm. You look like a woman who has been discarded, he said, his voice like velvet over steel. But I see a woman who is finally dangerous. Do you want to hide, Soria, or do you want them to crawl? I looked up into those obsidian eyes. I want them to lose everything. He offered me a hand encased in a black silk glove. Then marry the darkness, and I will give you the world as your throne. Welcome to AfroKorean Grit Stories, where we don't tell fairy tales. We tell stories of reclamation. This is the account of a woman betrayed by the 2 people who shared her blood and her bed. Of a twin sister who thought she could steal a life, only to realize she'd stolen a target. And of a man who doesn't believe in forgiveness, only in absolute loyalty. If you believe that the best way to heal a broken heart is to break the people who caused it, hit that subscribe button right now. Let me know in the comments, how far would you go for justice? This story is going to burn. Now, let me take you back to the night the gentle twin died, and a queen was born from the shadows of Seoul. The gates of the Kang-hyun estate didn't just swing open. They retreated, admitting me into a world of silent, terrifying opulence. As the black sedan glided up the winding driveway, the rain turned into a rhythmic drum against the roof, a stark contrast to the hollow silence in my chest. 2 hours ago I was a wife. Now, I was a shadow seeking a master. Lee Kang-hyun didn't help me out of the car. He waited at the top of the marble stairs, a silhouette of sharp angles and absolute authority. When I finally stood before him, dripping wet and shivering in my ruined anniversary dress, he didn't offer comfort, he offered a leather-bound folder. Inside this house, you are not a victim. Soria, he said, his voice cutting through the wind. You are an investment, and I do not lose money. He led me into a study that smelled of old books and expensive tobacco. The walls were lined with monitors displaying flickering stock feeds and security footage, a digital nerve center for a man who saw everything. He sat behind a desk of dark obsidian and gestured for me to take the seat opposite him. The terms are simple, he began, sliding a fountain pen toward me. My organization is transitioning. We are moving into legitimate tech and global shipping. To the world, I need to appear grounded, settled. I need a woman who possesses grace, intelligence, and a face that the cameras will fall in love with. You will be my fiancé. You will attend every gala, every board meeting, and every private dinner at my side. I looked at the contract, my hand trembled, but my voice remained steady, and in return, Kang-hyun leaned forward, the light catching the lethal stillness in his eyes. I become your sword. My analysts are already mapping Marcus's offshore accounts. My legal teams are preparing the structural defects in his latest development project. By the time I am done, Marcus Delacroix will be a name synonymous with failure, and your sister will realize that she didn't steal a kingdom, she stole a sinking ship. He paused, watching me closely. But there is one rule, absolute transparency. If you speak to them, if you waver, if you let your loyalty to that bloodline compromise my operations, the protection ends, and in my world, being unprotected is a death sentence for your ambitions. I thought of Marcus's smirk. I thought of Sorel's hand on his shoulder. The warmth I once carried for them had frozen into something hard and sharp. I picked up the pen. I don't have a family anymore, I whispered, pressing the nib to the paper. I only have an appetite. Kang Hyun watched as I signed my name. For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good, welcome to the shadows. Sorya, let's get you dressed for the funeral of your old life. The sun hadn't yet risen over Seoul when the transformation began. Kang Hyun's estate functioned with the silent, lethal precision of a Swiss watch, and by 6 in the morning, my bedroom had been invaded by a small army of stylists, tailors, and silent women with measuring tapes draped around their necks like silver snakes. The floral prince, Kang Hyun's voice drifted from the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim hallway light. Burn them, all of them. I looked at the soft, pink sundress draped over a chair, the one Marcus had bought me for our 2nd anniversary. It represented the woman who believed in happily ever after and quiet Sundays. A stylist reached for it, but I grabbed it first. For a heartbeat, the old Sorya flared up, wanting to mourn the scrap of fabric. Then, I remembered Sorel's smirk in the mirror. I handed the dress to the stylist. Do as he says, I whispered. The hours that followed were a blur of cold silk and sharp edges. They didn't just change my clothes. They changed my posture. Gone were the soft, slouching shoulders of a woman trying to be small enough for a husband's ego. Under the watchful eye of a master stylist, my long box braids were pulled back into a sleek, architectural crown that elongated my neck, making me look like a queen carved from mahogany. You are too expressive, Sorya, Kang Hyun remarked, sitting in a velvet armchair as a tailor pinned a charcoal gray suit jacket to my frame. The fabric felt like armor. Your eyes tell the story of your heartbreak. In the rooms we are entering, that is a scent predators can track. You must become a riddle, a woman with everything to hide and nothing to lose. He stood and walked toward me. Stopping just inches away, he reached out, his gloved thumb tracing the line of my jaw. When you see them again, and you will, you must not look for their approval. You must look for their jugular, metaphorically speaking. I looked at my reflection. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her makeup was a study in shadows and light. Her lips a deep, blood red that looked like a warning. She didn't look like a twin, she looked like an original. The soft brown of my eyes had hardened into something metallic. By evening, the transformation was complete. I stood in a floor-length gown of midnight silk that clung to my curves like a second skin. A single diamond pendant resting in the hollow of my throat. I looked expensive. I looked dangerous. I looked like a woman who had never known the touch of a man as mediocre as Marcus Delacroix. The victim is dead, Kang Hyun said, handing me a glass of dark wine. Long live the queen. I took a sip, the bitterness of the vintage matching the cold resolve in my soul. The old Sorya would have cried. This woman simply checked her reflection and prepared for war. The Grand Hyatt's ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers and whispered conspiracies, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and desperate ambition. Marcus was at the center of it, his chest puffed out as he gestured toward a digital rendering of his newest development project. Beside him, Sorel clung to his arm, wearing a dress that was a cheap imitation of my old style. She was playing the role of the supportive partner, but her eyes were darting around the room. Hungry for the status she thought she had finally secured. Then the heavy oak doors opened, and the room went silent. I didn't enter like a woman who had been discarded. I entered like a woman who owned the ground everyone else was standing on. My heels clicked against the marble with the rhythm of a ticking clock. I felt Kang Hyun's presence behind me, a silent, predatory weight that made the socialites instinctively part like the Red Sea. He didn't touch me, yet the way he moved in my orbit signaled to everyone that I was under the highest protection in the city. Marcus froze mid-sentence. His glass of champagne tilted dangerously as his gaze locked onto mine. I saw the progression of his thoughts, confusion, recognition, and then a blinding, ego-bruising shock. He expected me to be hiding in a dark room, weeping over his memory. He didn't expect a goddess in midnight silk who looked like she'd forgotten he ever existed. Sorya, the name escaped his lips like a gasp. I didn't stop. I walked right past him toward the head of the gala's board, my expression as cool as the diamonds at my throat. Kang Hyun stepped up beside me, his hand finally coming to rest lightly on the small of my back. The temperature in Marcus's immediate vicinity seemed to plummet. Marcus Delacroix, Kang Hyun said, his voice a low, melodic rumble that carried across the quieted circle. I've heard you've been looking for new investors. It's a pity, my fiancé and I were just discussing how unstable your current portfolio looks. Sorel's face turned a ghostly shade of gray. She looked at me, then at the man standing over me, and I saw the realization hit her. She had stolen a husband, but I had gained a king. She looked small, she looked common, Marcus tried to step forward, his face flushed with a mix of jealousy and greed. Soria, what is this? Who is this man? I finally turned my head, offering him a look of vague, polite curiosity, the way one looks at a bug they are about to brush off a sleeve. This is Lee Kanghyun, Marcus, but you should address him as Director Lee. I paused, letting a razor-sharp smile touch my lips. And don't worry about the deal. We've already decided to take the project in a different direction. The haunting had begun. As we walked away, I felt Marcus's eyes burning into my back, not with love, but with the terrifying realization that the woman he had broken was the only one who could now save him, and she had no intention of doing so. The following week, the atmosphere in Marcus's penthouse shifted from a victory lap to a pressure cooker. Sorel had spent her life wanting my skin, my clothes, and my husband, but now that she had them, she realized she had inherited a hollow throne. I watched the fallout from the sanctuary of Kanghyun's estate, receiving daily reports like a general observing a crumbling front line. Marcus was no longer the attentive lover Sorel had fought to steal. He was a man possessed, his ego bruised by the image of me standing beside a titan like Kanghyun. He spent his nights pacing the floor, staring at social media photos of me at the gala, his drinks getting stiffer as the hours grew later. He didn't look at Sorel with passion. He looked at her with a haunting sense of almost. Every time she spoke, he seemed to be listening for my voice. Every time she laughed, he winced at the reminder that he had traded the original for a desperate imitation. You're obsessed with her. Sorel's voice finally broke through the silence of their home, a sharp, jagged sound that carried through the open windows and into the ears of Kanghyun's informants. You got what you wanted, Marcus. You have me, why aren't you looking at me? Marcus didn't offer the comfort she craved. He didn't even turn around. You told me she was soft. Sorel, you told me she was holding me back. But look at her now. She's standing next to the most powerful man in the country while our investors are pulling out of the merger. She didn't need me, it turns out. I was the one who needed her. The words were a death knell for Sorel's pride. She had built her entire identity on being the more exciting twin, the fire to my water, but in the cold light of reality, Marcus was realizing that the fire she brought was only good for burning things down, while my water had been the very foundation of his success. Sorel began to spiral. She changed her hair to match my new, sleek crown. She bought dresses in the same midnight silks I now favored. But the more she tried to mimic the new Soria, the more pathetic she appeared to the man she had sacrificed everything to claim. She was a ghost in her own home, haunted by a sister who hadn't even raised a finger against her yet. From my balcony overlooking the city, I watched the lights of their penthouse flicker. I felt no pity. Sorel had wanted my life, and now she had it, every lonely, bitter second of it. She's breaking, Kanghyun said, stepping out into the cool night air to stand beside me. The jealousy is doing the work for us. It's not enough for her to break. I replied, my voice as steady as the mountain range in the distance. I want her to watch, as the man she stole begs to come back to a woman who no longer knows his name. The office in Kanghyun's estate was a cathedral of cold glass and high-speed data, a place where fortunes were dismantled with the tap of a key. Kanghyun sat across from me, sliding a slim, silver flash drive across the polished mahogany. It looked small, almost insignificant, but I knew it contained the weight of Marcus's entire world. Men like Marcus Delacroix are built on a foundation of sand, Kanghyun said, his voice a low vibration in the quiet room. They believe their charisma can outrun their crimes. But the numbers never lie, Soria. Here is the proof of the fire your sister brought into his life. Extravagance funded by theft. I opened the files, and the truth spilled across the screen in rows of unforgiving red. To keep Sorel satisfied, to buy the designer bags, the private jets, and the silence she demanded. Marcus had been siphoning millions from his company's pension funds and offshore development accounts. He wasn't the brilliant mogul he pretended to be. He was a parasite, bleeding his own empire dry to maintain a facade of perfection. He thinks he's invisible, I whispered, my eyes reflecting the glow of the data. Everyone is visible to someone. Kanghyun replied, the question is, how do you want to deliver the blow? All at once or piece by piece? Piece by piece, I said, a chill settling in my bones. I want him to feel the walls closing in. I want him to wake up every morning wondering which brick is going to fall next. The campaign began that night. I didn't send the files to the police or the major news outlets, not yet. Instead, I leaked an anonymous audit report to a minor shareholder. Then, an hour later, An unexplained wire transfer record found its way to a nervous board member. It was a digital slow drip of poison. By morning, the cracks were visible. Marcus's stock price dipped by 3%. By noon, his lead architect resigned. I watched from my balcony as the news cycle began to buzz with unconfirmed rumors of internal irregularities. I could almost see Marcus in his office, sweating through his expensive silk shirts, screaming at his IT team to find a leak that didn't exist in his system. But in his soul, I could see Sorel, her eyes wide with fear as her credit cards were declined at the boutiques she used to haunt. The man who had discarded me for being too calm was now drowning in the chaos of his own making. As I watched the red candles on the stock market ticker drop lower and lower, I realized that Kang Hyun was right. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the architect of a wrecking ball. The air in the private garden of the Kang Hyun estate was heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine, a sweetness that felt like a mockery. I sat at a wrought iron table, my hands steady as I poured a cup of tea I had no intention of drinking. I didn't have to turn around to know she was there. The sound of her frantic, uneven footsteps on the gravel was enough. Sorya, her voice was thin, stripped of the sultry confidence she had used to lure my husband away. When I finally looked at her, I saw a woman who was fraying at the edges. Her box braids were frizzy, her makeup poorly applied to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She looked like a ghost of the sister I once loved. "You have 5 minutes, Sorel," I said, my voice as cold as the silver spoon in my hand. "Make them count." She collapsed into the chair opposite me, reaching out to grab my hand. I pulled back before her skin could touch mine. Her eyes filled with tears, the same eyes I saw in my own mirror every morning. "Please, Marcus is losing everything. The banks are freezing our accounts. They're talking about an indictment. You have to talk to that man, that monster you're with. Tell him to stop the leaks. Tell him to let us go." "Why would I do that?" I asked, tilting my head with genuine curiosity. "Because we're blood," she sobbed, the desperation finally breaking through. "We're sisters, we shared a womb. Sorya, you can't just watch me lose my home. My life, think of our mother. Think of the bond we had. Family is supposed to be the one thing that never breaks." I set the teacup down with a sharp clack that made her flinch. I leaned forward until our faces were inches apart, two identical portraits of grief and rage. "You didn't think about our mother when you were laughing in my bed," I whispered, the words vibrating with a decade of repressed pain. "You didn't think about our bond when you watched me walk out into the rain while you held my husband's hand. You didn't think family was unbreakable then. Sorel, you thought it was a ladder." "I made a mistake," she gasped. "I was jealous. I just wanted to feel what it was like to be you for once." "And now you know," I replied, standing up and smoothing the invisible creases in my silk trousers. "You wanted my life, you have it. You have the man who betrays, the debt that smothers, and the loneliness that never ends. You killed the family the night you entered my room. There is no blood left between us. There is only water, and it's drowning you." I turned my back on her, signaling the guards to escort her out. As her wails faded into the distance, I felt a strange, hollow peace. The sister I had spent a lifetime protecting was gone. In her place was a stranger I had finally outgrown. The boardroom of Delacroix Global was a tomb of glass and steel, the air thick with the metallic tang of recycled oxygen and the sharp, sour scent of Marcus's panic. For years, this room had been his sanctuary, the place where he played God with other people's futures. Today, the sun glinted off the mahogany table like a blade, illuminating the sweat beading on his upper lip as he stared at the men in black suits who had occupied every seat but his. When the double doors swung open, the silence didn't just deepen, it solidified. I walked in first, the hem of my charcoal wool coat snapping against my calves with every rhythmic, intentional step. Kang Hyun followed a pace behind me, his presence a silent shadow that made the room feel smaller. Tighter, Marcus scrambled to his feet, his tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot from a week of sleepless terror. "Sorya," he croaked, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if it were a life raft. "Thank God, tell these people there's been a mistake. The merger, we're still on track. I just need 48 hours to clear up the irregularities." I didn't sit, I walked to the head of the table, the seat Marcus had always claimed as his throne. Kang Hyun pulled it out for me, and I sank into the leather, looking up at the man who had once told me I was too calm to understand the world of high-stakes business. "There is no more merger, Marcus," I said, my voice as steady as a heartbeat. "There is only a liquidation. Your creditors have sold your debt to a single buyer. You are no longer the owner of this firm. You are an occupant." I slid a heavy, cream-colored document across the table. It was the master termination agreement, the final nail in the coffin of his legacy. Beside it lay a fountain pen, the same one I had used to sign my life over to Kang Hyan's protection. "What?" Marcus whispered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray as he scanned the signatures. "Who bought us? Who would be crazy enough to take on this much liability?" "I would," Kang Hyan said, his voice a low, melodic threat from the corner of the room. "But I don't run companies, my fiancé does." Marcus's eyes snapped to mine, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. The soft wife was now his landlord. The woman he had discarded was the one holding the keys to his exit. "Sign it, Marcus," I said, leaning forward. "Sign the transfer, or the auditors I have waiting in the lobby go directly to the district attorney with the embezzlement files. You can leave this room with your dignity, or you can leave it in handcuffs. The choice is yours." His hand shook so violently, the pen rattled against the table. With a jagged, broken stroke, he signed his name, the moment the ink dried. I stood up and pulled a fresh set of papers from my folder. With a single, elegant flourish, I signed my own name at the bottom, the official termination of his employment and his health benefits. "Security will escort you out," I said, looking him in the eye one last time. "You have 10 minutes to clear your desk. Don't touch the company laptop, it's no longer yours." As Marcus was led out, stumbling like a man who had forgotten how to walk, I felt the final chord of my old life snap. I looked at Kang Hyan, and for the first time, I didn't see a protector, I saw a partner. The underground parking garage was a tomb of cold concrete and flickering fluorescent light, smelling of damp oil and impending storms. I walked toward the waiting sedan, my heels echoing like gunshots against the hollow walls. I felt the shift in the air before I heard him, a frantic, jagged energy that didn't belong in the curated silence of my new life. "Sorya." Marcus stepped from behind a structural pillar, his suit rumpled, his eyes wild with the frantic desperation of a man who had lost his reflection. He didn't look like a mogul anymore. He looked like a ghost, haunting the wreckage of his own greed. He lunged forward, reaching for my arm with a snarl that was half pleading, half threatening. "You did this, you poisoned everything. You think you can just walk away with my life. You were nothing before me." His hand was inches from my skin when a shadow materialized from the periphery. In a movement so fluid it seemed choreographed, Kang Hyan stepped between us. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't even raise his hands. He simply stood there, a wall of absolute, lethal stillness that made the air in the garage turn to ice. "Step back, Mr. Delacroix," Kang Hyan said, his voice a low, melodic vibration that carried the weight of a death sentence. "You are breathing my air, you are standing in my space, and you are attempting to touch my future." Marcus froze, his arms suspended in midair. The bravado that had fueled his outburst vanished, replaced by a primitive, bone-deep terror. He looked at Kang Hyan, really looked at him, and saw the dragon the underworld whispered about. He saw a man who didn't play by the rules of boardrooms and social galas. "She's my wife," Marcus stammered, though the words sounded hollow even to him. "She was your wife," Kang Hyan corrected. Stepping 1 inch closer, the movement was slight, but Marcus instinctively retreated, nearly tripping over his own feet. "You treated her like a porcelain doll you could break and replace. You were wrong, she is the blade I carry at my side. And if you ever find yourself within a mile of her again, I won't send lawyers, I won't send auditors. I will simply ensure that the world forgets you ever existed." Kang Hyan turned to me, his expression softening just a fraction, a silent question in his eyes. I looked at Marcus, the man I had once thought was my son, and felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. He was small, he was finished. "Let's go, Kang Hyan," I said, my voice steady and clear. "He's not worth the silence of this room." As we pulled away, I watched Marcus in the rearview mirror, a solitary, broken figure shrinking into the shadows of the concrete. He had tried to lash out one last time, only to realize he was fighting a ghost. I leaned back into the leather seat, the warmth of Kang Hyan's presence beside me, a shield I no longer had to ask for. The penthouse balcony in Seoul offered a view of the world that felt like a map of my own victory. Below, the city was a tapestry of neon veins and racing lights. A heartbeat I finally understood how to pulse. The news that morning had been a quiet, clinical funeral for my old life. Marcus's bankruptcy was final. His assets seized to repay the thousands of families he had defrauded. Sorel had disappeared into the anonymity of a distant city. Her face, once a weapon of my destruction, now just another fading memory in a society that only worships the winners. I stood at the railing, the cool night air catching the silk of my gown. I wasn't the girl who had cried in the rain outside a club. I was a woman who had dismantled an empire and built a fortress in its place. "You're thinking about them." Kang Hyan's voice drifted from the doorway. He didn't sound like a business partner or a protector tonight. He sounded like a man coming home. "I'm thinking about how much space they used to take up in my head," I replied, turning as he stepped onto the balcony. "And how little they matter now. It's like looking at a book I read a long time ago. The plot was predictable." He stopped beside me, his hands resting on the stone balustrade. For months, we had lived by a contract, a series of rules and transparencies designed to keep our emotions as cold as our investments. But as I looked at him, I realized that the man who had promised me fire had actually given me the only thing I'd never truly had with Marcus: truth. In the underworld, where every word could be a trap, Kang Hyan had never lied to me. He hadn't promised me a fairy tale. He had promised me power. He hadn't asked me to be soft. He had asked me to be his equal. Our fake marriage had been built on more honesty than a decade of my sister's smiles or my husband's hollow vows. "The contract is fulfilled, Soria," he said, his obsidian eyes searching mine. "Marcus is gone. Your reputation is restored. You are free to walk away with the settlement we agreed upon." I looked out at the Seoul skyline, then back at the hand he held out to me, the same hand that had pulled me from the rain. I realized then that I didn't want the settlement. I didn't want the peace of my old life. I wanted the man who saw the blade in my soul and sharpened it. "I think I'll stay," I whispered, sliding my hand into his. "The view from this throne is much better with you." He didn't pull away. He squeezed my hand, a silent vow that needed no papers or witnesses. The sun began to rise over the Han River, gold and uncompromising. The betrayal was over. The revenge was complete, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't a twin or a wife or a victim. I was Soria, and the world was finally listening. Thank you so much for standing with Soria and Kang Hyan through this journey of betrayal, transformation, and the kind of cold, calculated justice that only a queen can deliver. If this story reminded you that being soft isn't a weakness, it's just a layer that covers a blade. If it showed you that the family who betrays you doesn't define your worth, and if it proved that sometimes the most honest love is found in the shadows of a contract rather than the lies of a wedding vow, then please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to AfroKorean Grit Stories. We tell the stories that the fairy tales are too afraid to touch. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Asterisk, did Soria go too far in dismantling Marcus's empire? Or was it the only way to truly be free? Do you think Sorel deserves a second chance? Or is some blood too thin to be saved? And what about Lee Kang Hyan? Is he a monster who saved a queen? Or a king who finally found his equal? I read every single comment, and I love seeing how you all navigate these questions of loyalty and revenge. Until next time, remember, the people who try to break you are usually just terrified of what you'll become once you're whole. Keep believing that your reflection is yours alone, not your twins, and certainly not your past's. Keep believing that the best revenge isn't just winning. It's outgrowing the people who thought they could keep you small. This is AfroKorean Grit Stories, where loyalty is a kingdom, revenge is a masterpiece, and every ending is a sovereign new beginning. I'll see you in the next story.